Greetings, you fucking mercenary scum, and a kind welcome to my monster brothers. How's it going today, everyone? Today, we are back with a sequel review. Right out the gate, normally, this is the part of the review where I'd hold the book up and, show you the cover and everything. I'm just going to have to do it digitally, so... Today we're talking about Bloody Rose by Nicholas Eames. It's the sequel to his debut. I think it was his debut on the big screen, literarily speaking, and that was the Kings of the Wild. And Kings of the Wild was really, really good. I gave it a glowing review here on this channel. Bloody Rose... we'll get there. Suffice to say, I was not nearly as impressed with Bloody Rose as I was Kings of the Wild, and there's a few reasons for that. And so, we're going to get to that in just a minute, but really quick, I'm just going to remind you, if you need some Christmas gifts for the reader, for the book nerd, for the fantasy junkie in your family, or in your friend circle, check out my debut novel, The Garden of Lies. Great reviews on Goodreads, great reviews on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles, and it would mean the world to me. It would be my Christmas present if you would buy it and review it. And honest review, I'm looking for my first 1-star review. It's going to be a while. Lastly, before we get to brass tacks, like, share, subscribe, ring the damn bell. Do all the YouTube things. Let's talk about Bloody Rose. So, if you know anything about my channel, you know that the review system that I've come up with, that I use for all my reviews since I came up with it, is COMP, which is characters, originality, message and symbolism, plot, and prose. I feel like those 5 categories combined and interlacing with each other really form the heart of what makes or breaks a book. And I think by talking about those categories, you can really fit everything that is worth discussing in a book into one of those 5 categories. So, let's start right at the top of the list. Characters. Oh, I feel like this is the main place to have a discussion about this book, and it's one of the main places for me that I got such a letdown feeling from book 1 to book 2. Because in book 1, right, we had this group of friends that were all kind of, burnt out, glory days, good old boys type characters, and they were each a flavor of that character. And we got the band back together, and they were set in this man's world type setting, right? And the whole thing was very boys back in town, and the story formula worked very well with that general kind of feeling and theme. And everything really fit around that character composition very nicely. In this book, we didn't have any of those types of characters as main characters at all. There was no good old boys back in town vibe or feeling to it, and yet the story formula stayed the same. And so you can see that there might be a mismatch here in terms of the types of characters we have and the theme and feeling of the story. So, like in the first book, we have a group of friends who are mercenaries. We follow this character, Tam, who starts off as kind of a farmer's daughter type character, and then she progresses from being the bard of this band of mercenaries to, at the end of the book, spoiler alert, she progresses into just being a part of the mercenary group in general. And the entire time, this group of friends is very much in its glory days, right? There is no sense of we're back against the odds to do one last hurrah. The surrounding story for the characters is totally different. And so you would think that the story pacing and a lot of the other plot elements would change to accommodate the fact that the story surrounding these characters is very different. Nope. Not really. Not at all. So we have these characters. We have Tam. We have Bloody Rose, who's the leader. And oh my god, we're going to get into her. We have the Ink Witch, Kira. We have the Shaman, Brune. And then there's this Druin, whose name is Free Cloud. I actually quite like him. And then they have a booker. Basically, it's their mercenary band's manager. And I can't remember the guy's name, but he's a satyr. We're just going to go down the list of these characters and talk about what worked for me and what didn't. And then we'll talk about the villain a little bit. So starting with the farmer's daughter turned mercenary, Tam. This girl starts with this, we instantly get this idea that this girl has wanderlust, that she wants something more, right? She's that character, the farmer's kid who wants to go out and be a hero. That's her character type, and it's made obvious right out the gate. Some other interesting things about her is her mom was a famous mercenary bard. Her dad was a famous mercenary. And her losing her mom to a tragedy that I don't think ever really gets specified what happened to her mom, but it's obvious she died doing her line of work. There's some other notable things about the character, not least among them is that she's gay. Okay, we kind of get beat over the head with the fact that Tam is a lesbian throughout the book, and it's like, okay, there's nothing wrong with that, but you don't need to shoehorn in a mention that she's a lesbian every place it's even remotely possible to. We get it. She likes girls. I don't need to be reminded every 5 minutes, I swear. I swear I'll remember she likes girls. Don't need to. Yes, you did just say that she is indeed into girls. Yeah, that's 7 times in a row now. You get the point. You know what I mean? However, outside of the stereotypical and annoying aspects of her character and her character's presentation, overall, I did like Tam. If she wasn't gay, I could see myself dating a girl like Tam. And I think she's a sweet and wholesome character. But she just kind of felt by the numbers in every regard. She really felt like someone went down a character sheet and was ticking boxes and inserting tropes and figuring out how to make this person seem just alive enough to be believable. And so I could taste that in her characterization, and I obviously do not care for that. Next on the list, we have the titular character herself, Bloody Rose. And oh my god, do I have a lot to say about Bloody fucking Rose. Ugh. Okay, so let me tell you this. Let me just say this. Let me clarify and make this really understood, because I really feel like we need to say this, okay? This specific thing that I'm about to say, okay? There's a big difference between a strong-willed, imposing character who knows what they want and goes after it and doesn't take no for an answer. That character type. There's a big difference between that and an arrogant, brash, hothead who's the kind of person who gets themselves and their friends killed. Okay? Rose is very much the latter. She's built up by her friends and the world building around her as being this imposing figure who has some very impressive feats to her name, and who there's this whole sort of mythos around. And when you actually see the character moving through the world, what she says, how she behaves, and the kinds of things she does. You don't get that feeling at all. You don't get the feeling that this is some imposing female leader. You get the feeling that this person's a bitch. I've met Bloody Rose types in real life. And people don't follow them. People look at them and go, well, I'm walking over there now. People don't like these kinds of women. And there's a very distinct line between what Nicholas Eames was going for and what he actually put down on the paper. Bloody Rose comes off as an unlikable bitch. And besides her personality just being, stinking like a pile of shit, the character has genuine, serious character flaws that, when compounded with their unlikable personality, they're just a shit tier protagonist, in my opinion. Chief among them, she has this huge glory complex where she has to outglory her dad. She has to outfamous her dad. Her dad raised her on all these hero stories, and she grew up hearing all the bards sing about the accomplishments of her dad. And this glory fever drives her to, well, for one, she gets her first group of friends killed. Okay. She doesn't really learn her lesson from that. She proceeds to, even after getting the first group of friends killed, she leads her friends into insanely dangerous situations, makes brash decisions. She didn't really learn anything. And she has this huge complex about, oh, I got my friends killed. It's all my fault. And yet she still does stupid, reckless shit. And then, to compensate for the fact that she's doing all this stupid, reckless shit and that she knows is stupid and reckless, she develops a drug addiction to this stuff called Lion's Leaf, which is basically, it just kind of removes your fear. So it's probably something along the lines of herbal cocaine, because it's depicted as being these little leaves. Okay, so we have a character who fucked up, knows they fucked up, but won't change their behavior, has a drug addiction to compensate for the difference, and they're an unlikable bitch on top of it. And yet you're telling me that this character is a magnetic and enticing leader figure who compels people to have this extreme sense of loyalty and draws people to her like moths to a flame, and compels various members of this grizzled and very hard community of mercenaries to respect her reputation and all this stuff. And it's just not believable. The irony is that if it were to be believable at all, it would rely on the fact that she is Golden Gabe's kid, which is the biggest ironic slap in the face to the character you could possibly have. Because her whole character arc is she's trying to get out from underneath her dad's shadow, yet because of her personality and behavior, she would just compel people to be bitter towards her and say, you're only famous because of your daddy. Because she's an insufferable bitch. So yeah, I do not like her. It's clear that Nicholas Eames was going for like an anti-hero vibe with Bloody Rose, and we just got an unlikable bitch. There was no redeeming aspect of her character for me. Then, really quick, we have the Ink Witch, Kira, who is like your stereotypical, I'm in so much pain, I had a troubled childhood, look at my dark magic and awe kind of character. And she was pretty well done and thematically consistent and realistically portrayed. I have studied human psychology and, human behavior enough to know that certain character traits and behavioral traits are, consistent when you have such and such happen to you as a kid. There are certain things that just cause other certain things. And so the Ink Witch is well written from that perspective, in that she's realistic and believable. And I have a certain level of draw naturally to those types of characters. Again, because I have met so many of those people in real life, it's almost like I'm drawn to them in some ways, to be quite honest. But my point is, of all the band, I think Kira might be the best written in some ways. I really do. Next, we have Brune the Shaman, or Brune the Beast, as he's colloquially known. And I actually like Brune too. He's not quite as well established in his own type. He's not quite as fleshed out in the sense that he feels like a much more general, goofy, big brother type character. Whereas Kira feels like she's just a little bit more alive and a little bit less of a character. But Brune is still passable. By no means is he poorly written, and by no means does he feel like a complete typecast character. Just a little bit more so than Kira. Then finally, we come to the band's booker, who's this satyr, and I mean, this satyr's whole shtick is, look at me, I'm a horny goat man. So, I'm not really too impressed with him. He's obviously supposed to be the comic relief, and sometimes he delivers, but a lot of the time, I'm just, getting his actions, and I'm like, God, this dude's annoying. I would punch this dude in the face. So that's really all I have to say about him. He was like, your stereotypical comic relief character, and he was not anything besides that. Last on the list, we have Free Cloud, who's our, token mysterious bad boy type character. But he's well written in that role. And again, I genuinely like him in that role. He doesn't feel too much like a caricature, and that might just be my personal bias coming in because I'm a sucker for the mysterious bad boy character. No homo, but I'm into it. And besides that, his primary character motivation is that he is just madly in love and madly infatuated with Rose, and one man to another. God, do I understand that. So, maybe it's just that I empathize with the character so much because of his character motivation. Who's to say? But I like Free Cloud. He's alright. The villain was very much the generic big bad evil witch type character with a very simple motive and very simple goals. There wasn't really much interesting about her except for the in-world lore that surrounded her, because she was a regular druid who, through the events that surrounded her life and the way lore gets built up in this world, she ended up being a god. And so there's some interesting world building and lore done around the villain, but the villain's personality and motivations are just very basic, very typecast and by the numbers. Evil person is evil because corrupting magic and tragic event, and their goals is destroy the world because they're upset. Like, it's just so generic. So overall, I'm going to give the characters category a 70 out of 100. Could have used a lot of work. Now, Originality is where there's kind of a sticky situation here, because he still gets all the points for originality from his original concept and this original world he's established, and it's really pretty interesting. But this book is basically a copy-paste plot from the first book, and all he did was change the characters and settings and some of the exact specific beats in the story. But overall, it's a copy-paste plot. And I'm really not happy about that, because the plot for the first book, the reason the first book was so good was because the plot fit the characters that were in it perfectly. And they were all able to really, really shine. This plot, it just did not work for me in relation to the characters that were moving inside of it. It didn't feel organic. And there were some contrivances necessary in character motivations to make this plot work. So, unfortunately, I do not give the originality section in this book the score that the first one got. I'm actually going to bump the originality down to 60% on this one, just because, again, the world and the concept were original, but he copy and pasted his plot. He copy and pasted a lot of his kind of pre-established, specific tropes. He has some favorite tropes, and he just copy and pasted them across. And so, overall, only 60% in originality. Message and symbolism? I'll be damned if I know. Really. I mean, I'm really not sure what the message of this book is, and what, if any, really hard-hitting symbolism I encountered that really spoke to me. This really suffers, because all the messages that I did get aren't good. Like, the main character, Rose, abandons her kid for a life of being a mercenary and seeking glory. That's a shitty message. She ends up getting her lover slash, the guy who's basically her husband, Free Cloud. She ends up getting him killed. Still gets like a kind of happy ending and getting to return to her daughter. I don't like the message there. Like, I'm just supposed to gloss over the fact that you've got the father of your kid killed. I'm just supposed to just ignore that. Somewhere in there with Tam's character arc, there was some message about following your heart and being who you really are and all that shit, but it's like, it was so in your face, it was so obvious that was her character arc, that it was like, and it's one that we're all so familiar with, the be yourself character arc, the follow your heart character arc. It's if you're gonna do that character arc, you really got to be clever about it. I really need something a little bit more enticing than Tam's character arc, because it wasn't bad, but it wasn't like spicy caliente meatball either. Mama, spicy meatballs. So yeah, overall, I'm gonna give messaging and symbolism a 50%. I didn't really think there was anything super hard hitting, and a lot of stuff just was either what's the point, or the real message was lost in the weeds kind of stuff. Plot we already kind of covered, so I'm not going to spend too long here, but if you read the first book, this plot was really almost a copy and paste. I mean, we could skip some stuff from the first book because we didn't have to get the band back together, but we kind of had that story beat in this one because they recruited Tam right out of the gate. So we still have a getting the group together phase of the story. Then they make the rounds, kind of forming group cohesion, copy and paste from the first book again. Then we get some individual stories for the characters in the group. Again, copy and paste right out of book one. And then once the whole group is kind of got their stride going, and we're all running full steam ahead, we set off on the mission to fight the big bad. It's all copy and paste right out of book one. It really is. And so it's like, dude, if you're gonna copy and paste your own plot, at least do me a favor and keep the stuff that made that plot so good consistent, because you can't keep the same plot and completely switch out all of your character types and have it still work necessarily. So, yeah, overall, unfortunately. Plot, it only gets a 70%, just because, you know, that's obviously a passing grade. But it's not original. He copy and pasted his own plot, and the plot was shoehorned in terms of the beats and the way it progressed against character motivations and characterization. They did not seamlessly flow together. So yeah, 70% on plot. Here's one that's a little bit sticky, and here's one that I'm like, what do I say here? Because let me tell you, I consume this as an audiobook, and as an audiobook, I think the prose suffered because the narrator was not very skilled. I mean, she was trying to do like character voices, and a lot of her character voices literally overlapped. Like, she would give a character a voice that sounded this way up at the top of the paragraph, and then a character would reply and would have the same voice, and then the first character's voice changed when they responded. So the narrator was not very good at all, in my opinion. Especially when you factor in some of the mispronounced words and some of the pauses and pacing of speech and the faux yelling. Bloody Rose! I hate fake yelling in general. Very few people can do fake yelling and have it sound good. It's very annoying. And when this narrator fake yelled, I just wanted to like gouge my eyes out and shove them into my ears to block the sound. It was obnoxious. So the prose suffered for the sins of the narrator. However, if I were to read the book, I would probably have at least a slightly improved opinion of some of the character voice and prose, and so I'm going to try to factor that in and be courteous to the author, who, you know, it's not really their fault that the narrator sucks, especially if their publishing house picked their narrator. They didn't have much choice in that. So I'll give him 85 on prose, just because a lot of the things that were wrong were probably because the narrator was not very good in my opinion, but I still had to tolerate it. So everyone, there you go. That's my review of Bloody Rose, the sequel to Nicholas Eames' very good The Kings of the Wild. When you're talking about whether or not to pick up a sequel to a good book you read, I think this is one of those times where Kings of the Wild is a great book, worth a read. But if you really love the first one, and you like everything about it because it all fleshes out and comes together so well, I wouldn't recommend the sequel. Leave the taste of the book pure in your mind. Let it be a sanctuary to good times and feel good laughs with a little bit of seriousness on top. Let it be a smoky and savory flavor that you can keep on your mental palate without the bitter, rude awakening that is Bloody Rose. So, overall, the book gets a final score of 67 out of 100. Not very good. Not very good at all. Traditional publishing, you're slacking. Where art thou, mighty gatekeepers, who are supposed to ensure that things do not suck? Where art thou? And one final note about the book, one more thing about it that really irritated me. The first book set up some promises for the sequel that just plain were not delivered on, and those promises meant a lot to me in particular. So that one little thing didn't make the rating suffer all that much for me, but it is just a pet peeve when things are promised in earlier parts of stories and we never get them in the sequels. That's a huge pet peeve, and I wouldn't have fully, talked about the book if I didn't mention that, because as a reviewer and a reader, that's something that bugs the hell out of me. Pay off your promises. So guys, with that being said, it's time to close out the video. one more time, if you like fantasy, if you like stuff like Kings of the Wild, Lord of the Rings, Christopher Paolini's Inheritance Saga, if you like fantasy, go check out The Garden of Lies and its sequel, The Garden of Hope, available wherever books are sold. I'm probably going to be doing a Christmas sale shortly, so definitely keep your eyes out for that. Like, share, subscribe, do all the YouTube things, ring the damn bell, share the channel around, that helps the most. And I'll see you next time.